Emily Turner glanced at her phone, fingers hovering over the meet button, her gut tightening in protest. The screen glowed in the dim light of her apartment, the blinking cursor on the message bar taunting her hesitation. She had just typed a response to Alex's last message, asking to meet up that evening, but now, something inside her recoiled at the idea. She had been here before, matching with someone on a dating app, exchanging witty banter, thinking she might finally have found someone decent. Alex had seemed like the perfect guy at first. His profile was polished, his photos impeccably taken, nothing too over the top, just the right mix of casual and confident. He liked the same books as her, shared her love for indie films, and joked around with a sense of humor she could actually appreciate. It all felt so normal, so easy. Too easy, maybe. As days passed, their conversations shifted from light-hearted banter to something deeper. Emily could feel herself letting her guard down, thinking, maybe this one will be different. But now, here she was, on the verge of actually meeting him, and all she could feel was unease. The last few messages from him had been more insistent, more pressing, like he was demanding they meet, as if the pressure was building to a point where saying no might mean something worse. Her thumb hovered over the meet button again. She could hear her own heartbeat in the silence of the room, a soft thudding against her chest. Am I being ridiculous? She didn't want to be rude, didn't want to come off as paranoid. Maybe I'm overthinking it, she told herself. He's just excited. The nagging voice in the back of her head, the one that told her to be cautious, felt like a distant whisper. She quickly tapped the screen before she could think any more about it. Sure. See you tonight at 7? She tossed her phone onto the couch and let out a long breath. She hated how easy it was to convince herself that everything was fine. She'd gotten too comfortable with the digital version of Alex. But what if in person, he turned out to be someone completely different? The anxiety gnawed at her stomach as she picked out an outfit, debating between something casual yet stylish, nothing too revealing, just a simple but polished look that wouldn't feel too desperate. As she pulled on a pair of dark jeans and a fitted jacket, she texted her best friend, Lily. Meeting Alex at 7. Text you when I get there, check in at 8, okay. Lily, ever the supportive friend, sent back a string of heart emojis and a thumbs up. Good luck, and don't forget to call if it gets weird. Emily chuckled, despite the nerves tightening her chest. The cafe was only a few blocks away, and as she walked there, her mind raced. Why am I feeling this way? Her steps quickened as she rounded the corner, and when she finally saw the cafe sign, she was almost relieved to be at the destination, to stop walking and start the next phase of whatever this was going to be. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell of coffee and freshly baked pastries mixed with the low hum of quiet conversations. It felt like every other cafe she'd ever been to. Nothing about it screamed danger. Nothing stood out. But that didn't stop her heart from thudding as her eyes scanned the room. And then she saw him. Alex was sitting at a corner table, scrolling on his phone, a dark-haired man in his early 30s. He looked better in person than his pictures, more confident, more real somehow. His smile when he saw her approach was warm, the kind of smile that made her feel like he was genuinely pleased to meet her. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. She couldn't tell. Emily, he asked, standing up, his hand already extended toward her. His grip was firm, but not crushing, confident. Yeah, she said, shaking his hand. Alex, right? He nodded, smiling again as they sat down. The conversation started easy, small talk about the weather, about how her day had been. But the smile, that warmth, it didn't reach his eyes. His gaze, while engaging, felt just a little too intense, a little too sharp. So, tell me more about your job, he asked after a while, leaning forward just a little, his voice a tad too eager. Emily shifted in her seat, unsure of how much to reveal. She'd learned the hard way to keep personal details to a minimum. There was always someone out there who could use those details against you. But she didn't want to come off as cold or unwelcoming. "It's pretty typical marketing stuff," she said. "A lot of deadlines and long hours, but I enjoy it." Alex nodded thoughtfully, still leaning forward, eyes locked on hers. His gaze felt like it was digging deeper, like he was trying to read her, trying to see something beneath the surface. "So," he said, his voice lowering a little, "how come you're still single?" The question came out of nowhere, and it caught her off guard. It felt like an interrogation disguised as casual conversation. She laughed awkwardly, trying to brush it off. "I don't know," she said, forcing a smile. "I guess I just haven't met the right guy yet." Alex raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk curling on his lips. "Well, maybe that'll change tonight." Emily chuckled again, but it didn't feel right. His words felt too pointed, too rehearsed. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to focus on something else. Her eyes scanned the room, and that's when she saw it. The missing persons report pinned to the community board, half hidden behind a potted plant. At first, she didn't think much of it. Missing person posters were common enough, right? But as she got closer, her gaze lingered on the name at the top, Sarah Campbell, and she felt her stomach drop. It was a name she knew. Sarah had been a friend of a close friend, someone she had met at a party months ago. She'd never really known her well, but she remembered her bright smile and laugh. Her mind struggled to make the connection. Why was Sarah's face on the board? Then, Emily saw the photo. The woman in the picture was wearing a necklace, one that Emily was also wearing. Alex had gifted it to her just a day ago. She had put it on, thinking Alex would like it. Her blood ran cold. Emily froze, her heart hammering against her chest. She tried to shake off the thought, but it clung to her, thick with dread. "Everything okay?" Alex's voice cut through her thoughts. She looked up at him, her pulse quickening as she saw the shift in his expression. His eyes were dark, watching her intently, a knowing smile creeping onto his lips. "Ah, yeah," Emily managed, her voice shaking just slightly. She forced herself to sit up straighter, her mind racing to piece together the connection. This can't be happening. Her gaze flicked back to the poster, and then back to Alex, her stomach flipping as she realized the awful truth. Alex wasn't just another guy from a dating app. He was the kind of man who used fake profiles, who lured women into his life with a facade of charm, all the while hiding his true intentions. And Emily had just walked right into his trap. Alex leaned in a little, his smile widening as if he had read her thoughts. "You seem distracted," he said, his voice low. "Everything all right?" Emily's heart raced. She couldn't stay here, not with him. Not when she was so close to seeing the full extent of the horror she had stepped into. "I'm sorry, I just realized I have an urgent work call," she said, her voice slightly too high. She forced a smile, hoping it wasn't as awkward as it felt. "Already?" Alex's voice was smooth, almost amused, as if he hadn't noticed the shift in her demeanor. "Well, I'll let you go, then." He stood up, his movement slow, deliberate, as if he was savoring the moment. But something was off. He wasn't pushing her to stay. Instead, he just watched her, his eyes too sharp, too intent. The smile on his face remained wide, almost too wide, as if it was a mask that didn't quite fit. Emily felt a chill creep down her spine. She didn't know why, but the way he looked at her made her feel like prey. She turned quickly, walking toward the door with more haste than she intended. As she stepped out into the cool night air, the weight of Alex's gaze pressed against her back, the feeling of being watched crawling under her skin. Her stomach twisted, and she hurried to her car, fumbling with her keys, her hands shaking more than she wanted to admit. The moment the car door clicked shut, she exhaled, the tension leaving her body in a rush, but the unease remained, gnawing at her insides. She glanced around quickly, trying to calm herself, telling herself she was being paranoid. It was just a weird date, that's all. It didn't mean anything. But as she pulled away from the curb and hit the gas, her gaze flicked to the rearview mirror. Her breath caught in her throat. A car had pulled out from behind the cafe, and it was following her. Emily's grip on the wheel tightened, her pulse spiking. She glanced in the mirror again, heart hammering. It wasn't that the car was particularly close, but there was a certain unmistakable feeling to it. She could see the headlights in the mirror, and her stomach dropped. She couldn't be sure, it could just be another car, right? Her foot pressed harder on the gas pedal. She turned right at the next corner, hoping to lose the car behind her, but it followed. She took another sharp turn, then another. She felt like she was trapped in some twisted game of cat and mouse. Get a grip, Emily, she muttered to herself, trying to steady her breathing. You're being paranoid. It's just some guy who happens to be driving the same direction. But it wasn't just the car, it was everything, the way Alex had looked at her, the weirdness of his smile, the fact that he hadn't argued when she tried to leave. No. She knew something was wrong. The streets blurred as she drove faster, trying to shake the feeling of being hunted. Her thoughts spun faster than the tires beneath her. How long has he been doing this? She wondered, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. How many women has he done this to? She glanced again at the rearview mirror. The car was still there, close, but not too close. The driver wasn't tailgating, but there was an unsettling certainty to the way it moved, staying with her through every turn. Another light turned red. Emily's eyes darted nervously to the mirror. The car was right there, inches behind. Her foot hovered over the brake pedal, but then the light turned green. She slammed her foot down on the gas. Her heart raced in her chest, her hands slick with sweat. She couldn't let the car get any closer. She turned again, speeding through a quiet neighborhood, her mind frantic. Was she being followed, or was she just spiraling into panic? She glanced back again, just to be sure, but this time, the car had disappeared. She slammed her foot down on the brake, barely making the turn onto a quieter street. She pulled into a small, dimly lit parking lot, her hands still gripping the wheel, too tight. She parked and sat there for a moment, catching her breath. Everything was silent now. The car that had been following her was gone. She let out a long breath, trying to calm herself. It was just a coincidence. She told herself again. You're overthinking it. But the feeling of dread lingered, clawing at her chest. She stared at the dark street outside her car for a long time, her mind racing, her heart still pounding. She needed to go home. She needed to get away from this madness before it consumed her. She took one last look at the empty street before finally starting the engine and driving away. It wasn't until she reached her apartment complex that she felt the tightness in her chest start to loosen. She parked, still shaken, and got out of the car, trying to force herself to breathe normally. The night was cold, the air crisp, but the weight of the evening still clung to her like a shadow. As she climbed the steps to her apartment, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Her heart skipped a beat as she pulled it out. A message from Lily. You okay? Text me when you get in. She typed back quickly, trying to keep her voice calm. Yeah, just got home. Everything's fine. I'll call you in a minute. But as she reached the door to her apartment, she froze. On the front page of the local news website, Alex's face stared back at her from the screen, his smile wide and clean-cut, just like the photos he'd shown her. But this time, there was a headline above his picture. Breaking, local man linked to multiple disappearances. Emily's heart dropped into her stomach. She stared at the headline, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The story beneath it was brief, but it was enough to send a chill crawling up her spine. The police had linked Alex to the disappearances of several women in the area. They had all met him online, just like Emily had. They all had the same clean-cut image, the same smile that she had seen for the past few days. The women in the photos, the ones who had been with him, none of them had been found. She leaned against the door frame, her breath caught in her throat. She clicked the article open, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the information. One by one, the names of the women surfaced, and with each new name, Emily's stomach twisted harder. She recognized them. Some had been friends of friends, others just faces she had seen in passing. The real horror of it settled in like a weight pressing on her chest. Alex had been using fake profiles all along. His charming demeanor, his perfect smile, it was all an act. He had been hiding in plain sight. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, she didn't want to answer. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just narrowly avoided becoming one of his victims. How many others had he done this to before? The thought made her stomach churn again. She had escaped. This time. But she knew one thing for certain now. She wasn't just some unlucky date in a series of unfortunate events. She had been lured into something much darker, and it was only by sheer luck that she was still alive. Her mind raced as she thought about everything she'd discovered, Alex's fake profiles, the missing women, the twisted game he'd been playing for years. He wasn't just some guy she had a bad date with. He was a predator, and she had been his prey, only by some miracle managing to escape. But the nagging doubt wouldn't leave her. What if she wasn't the only one? She grabbed her phone again, her fingers scrolling through the countless dating apps she'd used in the past. Each photo she saw, every new profile she came across, felt like a potential red flag. What if Alex had been using multiple profiles, targeting other women just like him? She shivered. She needed to know more, needed to understand just how deep his manipulation went. Sitting back down at her desk, she began her search. Her mind raced as she sifted through the records, looking for anything that might tie him to other victims. She felt like she was looking into a dark void, hoping to find a thread to pull that would unravel the whole web of lies. It was frustrating, maddening work, but she couldn't stop herself. The more she dug, the worse things got. Alex's activity on dating apps went back months, years even. He'd used countless aliases and photos of different women, some of whom were still missing. Her stomach churned as she read the stories of other women who had vanished. They were just like her, on a first date, meeting a seemingly perfect man who had all the answers, all the right words. And then, just like her, they disappeared. Her mind reeled, unable to process the sheer scale of what Alex had been doing. He was more than a serial dater, he was a master manipulator, preying on women one by one, systematically erasing them from the world. She wasn't the first. She wouldn't be the last. But as she searched, a sudden spark of hope flickered in her chest. Among the many profiles, she found something that might actually help. A chat thread. One of the women Alex had been talking to had left a trail, a digital breadcrumb she hadn't realized was there. The woman had noticed something strange in Alex's profile, and in her panic, she had shared a screenshot before vanishing completely. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she examined the screenshot. It was Alex, but it wasn't the same profile photo he'd used when he had met her. This one was from a different account, an older one, and it had been posted months before. The implications were clear. Alex had been using the same photo, the same identity, on multiple apps and platforms. This is it, Emily thought. This is my chance to help catch him. Her fingers flew across the screen, quickly sending a message to Lily. I found something. A lead. I need your help. Within seconds, Lily replied. I'm on my way. Tell me everything. As Emily typed out the details, she felt a brief surge of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the break she'd been waiting for. If they could connect the dots, If they could find more victims, they might finally be able to expose Alex for who he really was. Emily gathered her thoughts, preparing herself to meet Lily. She would share everything she had found. It was a huge step forward, she could feel it. She was getting closer to the truth, closer to stopping him. But just as she was about to grab her jacket and head out the door, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, an unknown caller. Her stomach dropped. She answered it anyway. "Hello?" Her voice came out hoarse, shaky. "Emily," said a calm, too calm voice on the other end. It was Alex. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't heard his voice in hours, but it was still just as smooth, just as unsettling as it had been during their coffee date. "I see you're getting curious," he continued, his voice low and almost amused. "You've been digging around, haven't you? You've been looking into my past, trying to figure out who I really am." Emily's throat tightened. She could barely breathe. She had been so sure that she was in control, that she was doing the right thing. But now, hearing his voice, knowing he was one step ahead, made her feel small. Vulnerable. "You should stop, Emily," Alex said, his tone still eerily calm. "You're meddling where you shouldn't be. It's dangerous. You wouldn't want to make things complicated for yourself, would you?" The line went dead before Emily could respond. Her heart was hammering in her chest as she stared at the phone. She had been so focused on the investigation, so determined to uncover the truth, that she hadn't considered the possibility that Alex was watching her, watching everything she did. He knew. He knew what she was doing. And now, she could feel it. The noose was tightening. She quickly stuffed her phone into her pocket, shaking. She grabbed her jacket and rushed out the door. She couldn't stay here any longer. She needed to meet Lily, needed to share everything with her. She walked quickly, trying to shake the unease that clung to her like a second skin. Her mind raced, but she forced herself to focus on the path ahead. If she could just get to Lily, they could figure this out. As she approached the alley next to her apartment, something caught her eye. A shadow. It was him. Alex. Her heart skipped a beat, and for the first time, the mask slipped. For the first time, she saw the real monster behind the charming smile. His eyes were cold, calculating, empty. The warmth he had shown her before had evaporated, replaced by something darker. Emily's breath came in shallow gasps as she backed into the cold brick wall of the alley, her eyes never leaving Alex. He was getting closer, his steps slow and deliberate, his grin widening with every inch he gained. Her pulse hammered in her ears, the world narrowing to just him, just this moment. Every instinct in her screamed to run, to escape, but the alleyway was a dead end. "This is it, Emily," Alex said, his voice low and smooth. "You really thought you could outsmart me? You were never going to walk away from this." He stopped just a few feet from her, his menacing grin never faltering. Emily's heart sank. She was cornered. She could feel the weight of her fear pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. The blood pounded in her temples, and she could hardly breathe. She was exhausted, both mentally and physically, from everything that had happened. The constant terror, the relentless pursuit, it was all too much. Now, standing face to face with Alex, the finality of it all overwhelmed her. The terror that had been simmering for days finally bubbled over. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "just let me go." The words felt weak, impotent, as though they could never reach the man standing in front of her. His eyes gleamed with something dark, something twisted, as he took another step forward. He didn't speak, just watched her with a cold, calculating stare. Emily's mind raced. She could see the outcome of this in her head. She would be just another name in the long list of missing women. She would disappear, erased from existence, a victim in a game she had no control over. She wasn't ready for that. She couldn't be. Her back hit the wall, and panic surged through her. But in the haze of fear, a memory sparked, a survival tactic she'd learned in a self-defense class months ago. Don't fight where he wants you to fight. The words echoed in her mind, cutting through the fog of terror. The trick was to use the environment, to create chaos, to break the predator's focus. Without thinking, Emily kicked the ground with all her strength, sending a nearby trash bin tumbling toward Alex. It was a split-second decision, one born of desperation. The bin crashed to the ground with a loud clatter, startling Alex for just a moment, just long enough for her to act. She ran. Her legs burned as she sprinted down the alley, her heart in her throat. She could hear Alex's footsteps behind her, slower now, almost amused, but Emily didn't dare look back. She kept running, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The exit was only a few hundred yards away, but each step felt like it was dragging her further from safety. She burst out of the alley and into the crowded street, the sounds of the city washing over her like a cold, indifferent tide. She barely registered the pedestrians around her, only that there were bodies between her and Alex. She needed to disappear into the crowd. She needed to get away. She rounded the corner and saw the entrance to the subway station ahead. Without hesitation, she darted toward it, weaving through the people in her path, ignoring the sting in her lungs as her legs screamed in protest. She wasn't safe yet, but she was closer. Just a little further. She rushed through the turnstile, slipping underground, her heart racing with every step. The noise of the station was deafening, but it was a kind of comfort. She was surrounded by people now, and for the first time in what felt like days, Emily wasn't alone. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but she could feel the tension still coiling in her chest. She moved through the crowd, blending in, doing everything she could to make herself just another face in the rush of commuters. Her mind spun with the knowledge that Alex was still out there, probably looking for her. He had been tracking her every move, and now, she had just escaped. She found an empty corner and pulled out her phone with trembling hands. Her fingers shook as she dialed 911. The dispatcher answered almost immediately. 911, what's your emergency? The voice was calm, professional, but Emily could hear the urgency beneath it. I've been followed. I'm in the subway station, but I don't know if I'm safe yet. There's a man. He's been stalking me for days. Emily's voice cracked with the last words, but she couldn't stop. The fear and the adrenaline pushed her forward. Please, I need help. He's dangerous. The dispatcher spoke quickly, asking for her location and the details she could provide, but all Emily could focus on was the sound of her own voice, the pounding of her heart, and the knowledge that help was on the way. The police arrived within minutes, and Emily was taken to a safe location, where she was questioned about everything she knew, about Alex, his behavior, and his ties to the disappearances. She gave them everything she had, all the details she had uncovered during her investigation. The lead she had found, the chat threads, the profiles, it was enough. They already had a case. For the first time in days, Emily allowed herself to feel something other than fear, relief. It wasn't over yet, but it was a step in the right direction. She was safe. Alex had no idea she had contacted the authorities. He had no idea that his game was up. The manhunt for Alex continued, but it didn't take long for the police to track him down. They found him holed up in an abandoned apartment building, with evidence linking him to several missing persons. Forensic analysis confirmed that the women he had preyed upon had all been lured the same way, through online dating profiles, under false identities, with the same false promises. He had been operating for years, but Emily had been the one to expose him. As the police processed Alex, Emily sat in the back of the squad car, watching the chaos unfold. It was all happening so fast, too fast, almost, that for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe again. She was alive. She had made it. But as the adrenaline wore off, a new wave of realization hit her. How many others had Alex taken before her? How many others hadn't been as lucky as she was? She could feel the weight of the question settle on her chest like a rock. Days passed, and Emily's life slowly began to return to something resembling normal. The police had found multiple women who had fallen victim to Alex's manipulations, but they had been too late to save them. They had all disappeared, their faces now hauntingly familiar on missing persons reports. And yet, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she had barely scratched the surface. As she sat alone in her apartment, trying to wrap her head around everything that had happened, her phone buzzed. A new message. It was from an unknown number. Is this Emily? I just matched with someone on a dating app, and his profile looks a lot like this guy I'm talking to. Her fingers froze over the screen. She recognized the name, the same face. It was Alex. Her stomach twisted. She had thought it was over. She had thought she was free. But here was a new woman, just like her, about to make the same mistake. Some stories, you can never escape, Emily muttered to herself, staring at the screen. She deleted the message without responding, shaking her head. She couldn't save them all. But maybe, just maybe, she could stop someone else from becoming Alex's next victim.